A movie filled with murder, kidnapping, child endangerment, child custody battles, a few mental breakdowns. You guys know what movie I'm talking about? That's right. The Santa Claus, starring Tim Allen. If you guys don't notice, I cut my hair. Yay! And I dyed it. It's all red. I don't know why I'm really awkward right now. I don't know why I'm talking so fast. It's probably because I watched The Santa Claus for the first time this holiday season. And I have been watching The Santa Claus. I remember watching and loving this movie as a child. I watch it pretty much every year since then, and every single time I watch it, the weirder it gets. The weirder it gets, guys. That's right, The Santa Claus starring Tim Allen and the young Darren Criss. So yeah, everything I mentioned in the intro to this video actually happens in the movie The Santa Claus, which is, not surprisingly, owned by Disney. It's on Disney Plus in case you guys want to watch it. I recommend it, but I'm going to be explaining it to you now. So this movie is pretty dark. It gets darker every time I watch it. I really don't know why. Every time I watch it, I guess I just get smarter and I keep looking at it differently and watching it differently. And it is a pretty dark movie. But it's still a classic. This isn't me hating on the movie. I'm going to be explaining my thoughts and reasons for it right now. Stay tuned. So the movie is about a divorced man named Scott Calvin, who is a businessman and who makes toys. Nice. So he has a son named Charlie, and he lives with Scott's ex-wife, Laura, and her new husband, Neil.
Neil's waiting in the car, so...
Why doesn't he come in?
Because Daddy says you'll just end up saying something snotty.
Not necessarily. Could be rude or sarcastic. Whatever it takes.
See? I gotta go.
I don't care what you think about Neil, I freaking love Neil. So, right off the bat, they make Scott seem like a sarcastic, annoying father who definitely has beef with his ex-wife's new husband. Who is a psychologist, by the way, and that is a pretty big part of his character for some reason. And Charlie has to spend Christmas with Scott, and he definitely does not seem happy with it.
I don't want to eat here.
What are you talking about? Everybody likes Denny's. It's an American institution.
Charlie always brings up Neil whenever he can to Scott, which kind of makes him annoyed. So Charlie was going through a big Santa crisis, like if he could has one way or another. So he didn't know Santa was real or not, and Neil was actually the one who told him that Santa wasn't real. But that kind of rubbed Scott the wrong way. He really did not like that. He wanted Charlie to believe some more. But everything went wrong when Scott burned the dinner, so they had to eat at Denny's. But that night, Charlie heard someone. And guess who it was? That's right. Santa.
I heard a clatter.
What, Charlie?
There, a clatter.
Charlie, what are you talking about?
Then Santa apparently falls off the roof where you could see the snow kind of jumble up as if the snow was a carpet. So that's nice. And I was like, has Santa never been spooked before? On the job? He's never been spooked before? How did he just spaz out so aggressively? Was Scott the only man to ever see Santa on the roof before? How is Santa so hard to catch? Scott just walked out in his freaking underwear and he saw Santa on the roof. And Santa was literally screaming on the roof. Why was he screaming on the roof? So this movie begins with Santa dying. Surprise! But we find out he's not actually dead at first. He's just kind of lying there in the snow, probably in pain, spine broken. Then he disappears. What's happening?
Dad! He disappeared. Whoa!
Then Charlie comes out and he's like not even sad or scared seeing Santa Claus like dead on the ground. He's actually pretty happy about it.
You got him! You killed him!
So Scott goes through his suit, Santa's suit, and then he finds a card that says, "If something happens to me, put on my suit and the reindeer will know what to do." So we see the reindeer on the roof as the camera slowly pans up to it. And I mean, I don't know how he didn't see the reindeer on the roof before when Santa was, he was probably busy watching Santa fall to his death, but that's another thing. And also the reindeer in these movies, in the Santa Claus movie for some reason, is really disturbing. I don't know why, something about them. It's the CGI for them is very creepy, and the way they move and make noises are creepy. I don't know. That might just be a preference thing. But Scott puts on Santa clothes, and just like that, Scott Calvin is the new Santa.
Well, how do I look? Nice?
Which also makes me question everything in life, Kind of questions everything. So what if Scott wasn't the one to put on the suit? What if Charlie put on the suit? Then he's the next Santa. Just imagine a 6-year-old, growing a stomach, growing a beard, delivering presents around. It's so creepy. Ew. Then after the night of Scott delivering presents, under his control, the reindeer bring him back to the North Pole, where they meet all the elves. And you would think they would be sad about losing their Santa that they probably developed a close bond to. But they were honestly pretty happy to meet the new Santa. But none of the elves wanted to, take a few seconds to explain to this, regular guy that he is now the mythical creature known as Santa Claus. And basically all the elves kind of got annoyed whenever he questioned them.
You are.
No. Who's the head elf?
You are.
Hey, who's causing all the trouble around here?
She is.
So we meet the head elf named Bernard. You might recognize him from the Addams Family. But he didn't give Scott the time of day, barely explaining anything to the guy.
Did you or did you not read the card?
Yeah, I read the card.
Then you're the new Santa.
He finally does tell Scott what's going on, but he's kind of pissed while explaining it to him. He's like, "You're Santa. What is so hard to understand about that?"
I'm not put on suits as a kid.
Try to understand this. It's Santa's job, but Santa fell off the roof. Your roof. You read the card, you put on the suit that clearly falls under the Santa Claus, and now you're Santa, okay?
But then, and in case you haven't, seen the movie or haven't seen it in a long time, the card that Scott found on the Santa was actually a contract, aka a clause, meaning the end of a contract, saying that if he puts on Santa's coat, which he did, he's now Santa. Not Santa Claus the person, Santa Claus the clause. Haha, get it? The name of the movie? Santa Claus. So Scott then falls asleep with Charlie. Next to Charlie. Okay. But then he wakes up at his house. So I don't know exactly how that happened, but he fell asleep at the North Pole, and now he's at his house. So cool. And he wakes up like nothing happened. Scott assumes it's a dream, but then he realizes that he's wearing the same clothes that he fell asleep at the North Pole that was given to him by elves. So, yeah, he still brushes it off, but Charlie seems to pretty much remember the whole thing. Now, this is where the story gets dark. Because this whole movie takes place within a course of a year, pretty much, and Charlie still believes that his dad is Santa. And Neil and Laura start to get kind of concerned about how far Charlie is believing this whole thing. After a while, Scott begins to grow a beard, like Santa, and then gains a significant amount of weight and starts to crave milk and cookies. And kids even begin to recognize him as Santa, even though at this point, he still doesn't really know what's happening to him. He's really confused. He doesn't know if he is Santa. He still doesn't know if that was a dream or not. But he's like starting to kind of believe Charlie a little bit more. But this also makes Neil and Laura like very concerned because they think that Scott is basically mentally ill and basically borderline insane and is physically turning himself into Santa to basically feed into Charlie's delusions, which is pretty crazy. And it got so bad where his job actually put him on leave so he could see a shrink because they don't know what's going on with him either. Like it's dark.
I really have to tell you that this is beginning to scare me. I never thought you would stoop to changing your physical appearance in order to make Charlie like you. Do you have any concept of how dangerous this is to a little boy?
Whoa.
And Scott doesn't know what's going on with him. Like, again, he would shave in the morning and then grow like a full white beard. Like, what? And of course, he would crave milk and cookies. He would gain a significant amount of weight. People are concerned about him. They think he's mentally insane and he doesn't really know what's happening. But Charlie still believes that he's Santa. Because, he is. No one just knows it yet. They even take him to like a kid psychologist and then they talk to a lawyer. Like, it gets dark. But there was a scene between Laura and Neil that like kind of always confused me. Because Laura said that she was around Charlie's age when she stopped believing in Santa. Because she didn't get one present that she wanted. Like, what? Like, when I was younger, there was plenty of presents I didn't get that I asked for. And not in like a braggy way. Like, I didn't care. Like, maybe they were like, I don't know, like a freaking notebook or something I wanted. And maybe I didn't get it. I didn't stop believing in Santa because of that. Like, who grows up with like that much Santa baggage? Like, it's almost like trauma to them at this point because they were getting really worked up talking about this. Like, Laura was like, borderline on the verge of tears, and Neil looked like he was shutting down. Like, it got pretty serious between them. I would never think that, I wouldn't think that adults would care that much, especially adults that are like that age. Like, when you're like 18, maybe you start getting kind of sad because you miss your childhood, you miss when Santa was still real, you miss like the fun times you had with Santa. But when you're like in your 40s, it's kind of like you kind of grow out of it, especially by the time you have a kid. But they feel like they think about it a lot. I wonder if they do think about it a lot. And then Neil said the same thing happened to him, but except he was 3 years old. Damn. But eventually they made it clear that Charlie wasn't allowed to see Scott during this time of year. But he goes to the house anyway. In case you don't remember, at the beginning of the film, Bernard tells Scott that they'll give him a year to get his affairs in order, but he's due back at the North Pole on Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving is coming up. He goes to Neil and Laura's house, and Scott freaking kidnaps Charlie.
Charlie? Scott? Charlie!
He takes him to the North Pole for a freaking month. A freaking month, dude. Like, without even letting Neil and Laura know. What? Like, they both called the police for a stolen child and have no clue where their son is for a month. What? The police are also after Scott for stealing a child that isn't even his. Well, it is his, but he's not even allowed to see. Like, what? But Charlie doesn't even give a crap about Neil and Laura. Yeah, I know he's only 6 years old, but he even calls them for a second to tell them that he's at the North Pole. And then he just hangs up. Like, eventually Scott gets busted and he gets arrested. Oh, but don't worry, because a few elves and Charlie bust him out.
Where to bust up my dad?
Add that to the list of, like, illegal actions in this movie. Scott and Charlie return home, and Charlie doesn't want to be with his mom or Neil. Like, he hasn't seen them for a month, and he still doesn't want to be with them. Like, Laura takes one look at Scott, and then she realizes, hey, maybe this guy is Santa.
Oh my God. It's you. It really is you. You really are Santa Claus.
That's pretty much the end of the movie. Like, no joke. That's pretty much the end of the movie. I mean, Scott then flies away, on his sled, and people watch below, and it's kind of weird how, like, the adults are just kind of, like, watching. Like, they see this every day. Like, hey, a magical guy in a flying sled. I've seen that in Vegas. And there's a few plot holes in this movie that hasn't really been resolved until almost 30 years later. Let me explain. In case you guys don't know, there is a new Santa Claus show. By new, it came out last year. And I believe a new season came out this holiday season. And yeah, it's a holiday show. Again, starring Tim Allen. It's about the Santa Claus. About what happens after the third movie. And I made a review on that show almost a year ago, so shout out. But literally, it answered the question as to why the elves are so chill about their Santa dying. And why did Santa just, like, fall off the roof so easily? Like, why did all of this seem planned? Because we find out it was all planned. It wasn't a mistake that Santa fell off the roof. Scott was the chosen one. It's also sad to think that if Scott, like, never became Santa, then Charlie would probably end up losing contact with his dad. And that's exactly what happened in the second and the third Santa Claus movies. I'm also not going to do a whole review on all of those movies because that's, like, a whole other big topic. But basically, the second movie showed Charlie as a teenager and, like, how he's going through some sort of rebellious phase because Scott was, like, never around. And, he had to keep the Santa secret, and that was pretty hard for a teenager to do. That's, like, all he really wanted to do is tell people that his dad was Santa. And then in the third movie, we see, like, an alternate reality if Scott never became Santa. And it showed that Charlie grew up distant of his dad, and he became a rebel because, he had no father figure in his life. And being Santa simply did change his personality. Like, he went from a stubborn, sarcastic, kind of cruel businessman to a happy, fun, and jolly man like Santa is meant to be. And just because he's Santa, like, he gets a pass for stealing a kid, basically breaking a restraining order, and breaking out of jail. Oh, but it's okay. The dude's Santa. And if you guys want to watch the video of me discussing the Santa Claus show, link will be in the bio. And, well, description. You know what I mean. And even though it looks like I'm crapping on this movie, I watch it every year and I do enjoy it. As well as the second and third movie. I just wanted to discuss some of the dark themes that I noticed now that I'm older. But hey, thank you guys for watching and have a jolly holiday. And if you see Santa on your roof this Christmas, just push him off the roof and you get to be him. Bye.